In this episode, we talk about politics. I know. Don't skip this episode. It's going to be a good one. Get excited because this is Tiny Leaps. Big change. Big change. Welcome to another episode of Tiny Leaps. Big changes, where I share simple strategies you can use to get more out of your life. My name is Greg Clunas, and this episode is a little different than my usual episodes. There may or may not be any sort of real takeaways as far as like, oh, here's an action item you can do for the day. But it is important nonetheless. And I will preface all of this by saying that this is another one of those episodes where there is a topic I think is incredibly important, and I'm just sort of turning on the microphone, the camera, and going. So this should be a discussion. This should be a conversation, and I'd love to hear from you over on the YouTube at youtube.com/Greg Clunas. Just drop a comment on this video. Now, before we start, let's take a look at today's sponsor. How would you feel if you saved an extra $1,500 this year without lifting a finger? That's exactly what Empower can help you do. It's an awesome mobile app that makes saving and managing your money the easiest thing that you'll do all day. For starters, Empower has an automated savings feature. You simply tell the app your weekly savings target, and every day, Empower studies your income and spending and automatically knows when to move the right amount of money into your savings account, where you're less likely to spend it. It's called AutoSave. Just set it and forget it. If you want to save $1,500 more this year, you've got to check out the Empower app. Download Empower, that's EMPOWER, in the App Store or Play Store. You can get $5 for free, $5 when you use the offer code TINYLEAPS. Head over to empower.me/tinyleaps and use the offer code TINYLEAPS. I think the best way to start this episode is to just sort of share the story that inspired it. Or it's not as like a specific story, but basically, as many of you know, I recently moved to New Hampshire. Now, this was mostly for personal reasons. Rachel got into grad school, and so I'm here with her, supporting her as she goes through that. And one of the things I was really excited about with the move is that New Hampshire, at least as far as the Democratic primary goes, and I'll sort of give you a little bit more about my personal political viewpoint in a second here, is a very important state. So the primary here in New Hampshire is typically a big part of the political process, whereas where I lived prior in New York, it was typically later and it didn't really matter as much. And I got interested in politics back in 2016. I really started paying attention then. And that was the first election I was able to vote in, which I'll talk about here in a second. So when we moved, I got really excited because it meant that I could be a part of a contest, I guess is the right word for it, that actually held some weight, right? That actually mattered in the primary process as far as choosing the Democratic nominee. Now, to give full disclosure here, and none of what I'm about to say is going to really be present or affect the episode, but I do find that it's important to be as transparent as possible with you. So full disclosure, I am a Bernie Sanders supporter. Now, at the time of this recording, we're not doing too well. We're kind of getting our ass kicked. But I am a supporter for him for president, and I am what I would consider a social democrat, or what he calls a democratic socialist. I believe in policies like Medicare for All or the Green New Deal or any number of left-leaning progressive kind of policies, right? I'm pretty much on board with that sort of wing of the Democratic Party. And I know that that's not everyone who listens to this show. I know that there are many Republicans who listen to this show. I know there are many Trump voters who listen to this show. I know there are many Warren people and Buttigieg people and Klobuchar people and Biden people who listen to this show. And so when I say that the rest of this conversation is still important, I do so because I don't want your views of the things that I believe in the candidate I'm supporting to cause you to walk away from this episode. Because ultimately, what we are discussing here is the question of why politics is important for your personal development. Because this is something that, so again, I launched this show in 2016. I also got interested in politics in 2016. And this is a bridge that I've been trying to figure out how to get across for the past 4 years. And I haven't quite figured it out. And this episode isn't necessarily going to be it. But the truth is that politics, the things that get passed into bills, the judges that are in our courts, and this is obviously true for the United States, but it's also true for every other country out there that has some system of government. These things matter. These things affect our ability to develop ourselves. These things affect our ability to grow as human beings. They affect our opportunity. They affect the things that we're capable of doing and the things that we see as options in our lives. Like, policy and politics matters. And the reason that I started this by sort of talking about moving to New Hampshire, getting involved, being excited for the voting process here, is that this was the first time that I actually got involved in politics, where I volunteered, where I did everything I could to hand the state to my chosen candidate. Now, we did do well in New Hampshire, but that's not the point. The point is that during that process, and I'm sure anyone who has done door knocking for any candidate and on any side of the political spectrum can attest to this. During that process, I started to really understand that so many people in this country do not understand the value or the role that politics plays in their life. And because of that, and I don't mean that they're ignorant, I don't mean that they're stupid, I don't mean any of the sort of like negative things about it. What I mean is that people just are not engaged. And I get it. It's really difficult to stay on top of everything, especially during a primary. There's so many different ideas. There's so many different candidates. Everyone seems great, and you just don't really care. Like, whoever the best guy is, I'll vote for him, or the best girl, or whatever it is, like, I will vote, right? That's how some people deal with it. And then some other people deal with it as, well, you know what, I'm going to get screwed anyway, so I'm just not going to vote at all. And it's unfortunate. And I met so many of these people while I was door knocking for Sanders. People that didn't necessarily support Sanders' ideas. And that's fine. I personally think that they're good. But if you don't, that's fine. The perspective you have on the world, the worldview you have developed has led to that decision. And I want to understand it. The thing that I cannot wrap my head around is when people just don't see the value of it. And so part of what I want to do with this episode is to help anyone out there who is disconnected from politics, who maybe doesn't care about the process, to find their way to it. Now, wherever you land in the spectrum is completely up to you. I'm not going to make any recommendations. I'm not saying you should support any candidate over any other candidate. I'm not saying you should support any ideas over any other ideas. I'm leaving all of that to you because I respect the heck out of you. I really, truly, honestly do, and I hope that you know that. But what I think is important is that we are engaged. The United States, unfortunately, has some of the lowest voter turnout across the entire world. But yet we go around saying we are the best country in the world. The truth is we're not. We are losing in almost every single category. The only things we win on is the number of people in prison. Like, that's kind of insane. Like, that's an insane fact. And why is that? It's because we are not engaged, because we don't have things that we want to see happen that we fight for. Because this country was built by people. It's for the people, by the people. That's part of our thing, right? Like, that's a thing that we say all the time, but none of us actually believe it. At some point along the line, we decided, you know what? The people in charge can figure it out. No. Why is it that when it comes to our personal development, we say, oh no, I need to take control. But then when it comes to policy and politics and the things that affect our ability to control the future of our own lives, we say, they can figure it out. Get involved. I know this is sounding a little bit like a lecture. It's not meant to be a lecture. It's really not. Again, wherever you end up on the political spectrum, that is between you and yourself and whoever you feel like sharing it with. I know where I ended up, and that's because of the situation I've found myself in after living however many years. And you'll end up somewhere based on the worldview you've developed after living however many years. And that's fine, as long as we are engaged. Because at the end of the day, the policies that people fight for, that the Congress writes into bills, that the president either signs or vetoes, that the judges vote on, those things, that's what affects our ability to live our lives. Like, believe it or not, your ability to have a job in the United States is very heavily affected by the government and the bills that get passed, and whether or not they bail out certain industries or don't bail out certain industries. And guess what? You're the one who theoretically represented the person who voted for XYZ thing. And again, I'm not trying to get into any specific arguments around any specific viewpoints in the world or political views. I don't care where you end up. But you have to recognize that wherever you end up, you need to fight for the thing you believe in. You need to be willing to put in that effort, to go door to door, to talk to people, to get people on your side, to get more people involved. You have to be willing to work just as hard in the political world as you are willing to work on yourself, because those two things are not separate. We can't just ignore the political process and say, oh, well, I'll just work on myself. It doesn't work that way. I haven't had health care for 4 years, partially because of policies that exist right now. Now, I'm telling a little bit of my own personal story so that I can express how important this is. Here's the thing. I don't have health insurance. I can't afford health insurance. I've not had health insurance since I turned 26. Thankfully, because of Obamacare, I was able to keep my mom's health insurance until I was 26. But because I chose at a young age to build a business for myself and to go off on my own and to try and help other people, I'm not in a position where I can get health insurance right now. And guess what? I'm fine with it right now because I'm young right now, because I take care of myself right now. There's a lot of people who don't have health insurance who are significantly worse off. But let me ask you this. If I didn't have health insurance and I had a family, do you think that I could go off and start a business? Sure, in theory, I can do it, but it's significantly harder. It's significantly harder. I would have to keep my job in order to keep my health insurance. That's a direct scenario where policy would be making it harder for me to develop my life, to move forward. If you really look at your life, you can find examples everywhere. And again, I don't care where you end up on beliefs. Maybe you don't think Medicare for all is good. Fine, whatever. We can have that discussion. But this episode right now is not about that discussion. This episode is hoping that you realize how much this matters. Policy and politics and the people that represent you, they matter. They affect your day-to-day life in very major ways. They affect the decisions that you are able to make in very big ways. And if you've tried this personal development thing before and kept running into roadblocks, a lot of those roadblocks may have been because of the policies that exist in the world that you live in. And the only way that you can get policies that are favorable to you and your experience is to get involved, because no one else is out there representing you. Yes, you in theory have a representative, but if you didn't vote for that person, if you didn't vote for the person who has the ideas that you believe in that will help you the most in your life, guess what? You're not being represented. There is someone who represents your district. There's someone who represents your state. There's someone who represents your party. But guess what? If they don't fight for the things that affect you, you are not being represented. And if they're not fighting for those things, you're not going to get them. And your personal development just got a whole lot harder. So for those of the three of you still listening to this episode, thank you. This episode was inspired a little bit from frustration because my candidate's not doing great right now in the primary, and we're probably going to lose. And that's what it is. We fought hard and it didn't come out with the W. Okay, whatever. But we at least fought hard. And we at least know the policies that we're trying to make happen. We at least know the role that it'll play in our own individual lives and in the lives of people all over the country. We fought for that. Now, we didn't win, but we did fight for it. But as I was going through knocking on doors, there were so many people that disagreed with me, which is great. But they weren't fighting for it. They weren't willing to go out. They weren't willing to do the work. They weren't willing to actually go and vote. They weren't willing to get involved. And that's just sad. Because you know what policies affect you. You know what matters to you in your life. You know what will make your life better. It doesn't always have to be you pushing the boulder up the hill. It can be you and a group of people pushing the boulder up the hill to get one major thing passed that allows you to significantly improve the quality of your life, to get a better job, to get the health care you need, to whatever it is, to lower your taxes, whatever it is. You could fight for it. You could go out and be that person who's willing to not only develop themselves and grow as a person, but to develop the world around them, and to subsequently have a massive effect on your personal development, on your spouse's personal development, on your kids' personal development. That's the power that politics and policy has. But so many of us just are not engaged, and we just don't care. And that's why the country is the way that it is. That's why it's as divided as it is. That's why no one is getting what they want. So thank you for listening. I don't really know what the takeaway here is. There doesn't have to really be one. I do hope, though, I'm saying a silent prayer that you choose to get involved. Again, whatever side you're on, whatever issues matter to you, get involved. That doesn't mean you're going to win, but at least you fought for it. So with that said, thank you so much for listening. I've been Greg Clunas. If you feel like subscribing, click subscribe. This was a very politics-heavy episode. I don't typically do these. This is actually the first time I've talked about politics at all in over 500 episodes, so forgive me, but I felt that it needed to be done. And I don't know if it's helping anything or doing anything, but I do hope that it helps you to get involved and to fight for the things you need in your life, both in your life, in your day-to-day life, and in the political world around you that controls and affects your life. And as always, remember that all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day.